Well, Russia could soon provide maintenance for Soviet-made military equipment used by NATO members in Afghanistan. Moscow's man at NATO hopes next week's summit between the two sides could further a new spirit of cooperation. Dmitry Rogozin says Russia would also like to be kept informed of developments and changes of strategy in Afghanistan. Now, let's get more on this with Paula Sleer, who is live from Kabul. Paula, great to see you. Thanks for joining us. I'll just start with my first question. What are the grounds for Russia-NATO cooperation in Afghanistan?
Well, at the moment, there is, as you mentioned, a lot of Soviet-made weapons, helicopters, military vehicles already in operation here in Afghanistan. And I'm talking about personal armored carriers. I'm talking about Russian jeeps, and you've seen many of them here on the streets of Kabul. There is a Russian company known as Vertical T that is the main supplier of cargo helicopters for American and NATO operations. But perhaps the most important Soviet-type equipment currently being used in Afghanistan is the Russian gunship. And here we're talking about Ka-50 Black Sharks. We're talking about Mi-28 Night Hunters. And these gunships were perfected from 10 years of Soviet fighting here in Afghanistan. They've been tried, they've been tested, and unlike their American counterparts, they can deal with the terrain, they can deal with the difficult Afghan climate. There is, of course, still the weapon of choice among Taliban fighters, among Al-Qaeda, and that is the Kalashnikov. They buy cheap versions of it from China. So because of all this Soviet-style equipment being used in Afghanistan, there is a great need for Russian expertise, a great need for Russian know-how in terms of maintaining it. And until now, Russian technicians have been involved, but only when NATO members get permission from the alliance. What the new deal that is set to be signed on December the 4th in Brussels proposes is that this cooperation will be more direct.
So, Paula, I mean, is this further evidence of a real improvement in Russia-NATO ties?
I think it certainly is evidence of that. We're talking here about military cooperation between NATO and Russia that was frozen after last year's South Ossetian conflict. We're talking about military cooperation in the Mediterranean Sea. We're talking about military cooperation off the Somali coast. They're dealing with piracy. But an important point to make is that we're also dealing with common interests between Russia and NATO. And those common interests include the fighting of terrorism here in Afghanistan, the very difficult and very extensive drug trafficking that happens in this country, and also issues of non-proliferation. Having said all of that, Russia's permanent envoy to NATO, Dmitry Rogozin, recently accused NATO of what he called excessive shallow dialogue with Russia over NATO and US operations in Afghanistan. And he said it was imperative that Russia, who has been helping Western efforts in this country, he said it was imperative that Russia be more in the loop and be told more about their operations, their dealings and their plans for this country.
Paula Sleer reporting for us live from Kabul. Paula, thank you very much for that report.